Welcome to On the Bubble Podcast, episode 88. I'm your host, Sebastian J. Wida, and with me is my co-host, Yuki Lee Bender. Today, we're going to be doing an episode on how to draft Oscilio. This is going to be very similar to, I think, the Aurora list that we talked about last time, and I think a lot of the things that we talked about last week will kind of apply here as well. So if you haven't listened to the Aurora one yet, I would recommend listening to that one first and then coming back to this episode. But before we talk about Oscilio, how was your week, Yuki?
My week's been pretty good, honestly. Have we recorded since the ProQuest?
No, this is the ProQuest was like this Saturday.
Yeah, life has been kind of crazy. There's just like a lot going on. But so I'm sort of losing track of time a little bit here. But yeah, I guess it was just this most recent weekend. So my week was fantastic. We went to a ProQuest together, about an hour drive or so from us, 45 minutes. I played Aurora, something very, very similar to what's on the Patreon and the public deck list I posted. A couple cards changed, like had a Poison the Wells, for example, since I know a certain podcast co-host enjoys Count Your Blessings. But yeah, I played Aurora. It was a small PQ, 12 players, I think. Just a lot of the locals that would normally go weren't able to make it out this week for just kind of like various unrelated reasons. Just like independently, a bunch of them just couldn't make it. So it was, yeah, smaller PQ, but I went 4-0 in Swiss and then took out the top 8 as well. There's a tournament report on Patreon, as well as some content around that Aurora deck as well on Patreon, and a whole bunch of other content coming out. There's like draft tier list on Patreon for paid members, and then today I posted a draft walkthrough where I did a Rosetta draft on Runaways server, and people can watch that. I kind of talk about the picks and talk about my play decisions, and I think it's like a pretty sweet deck as well. So lots of content coming out, trying to post kind of something public roughly weekly and something for Patreon roughly weekly. So that's sort of been my week. Lots of worlds testing as well.
How many drafts have you been doing a week right now?
I don't even know. I usually go to like maybe 2 armory, like 1 to 2 armories per week. And then last week I did like so many online drafts, like 10 plus last week. This week has been a little bit less, a little more focus on CC, but I definitely done maybe like 4 or 5 this week, maybe 5.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, that's a lot of drafts. Man, I feel like are you feeling good to draft that world so far, or do you still think you need a couple more drafts?
I think I'm getting pretty close. I think I understand most of the decks. On the Earth side, I feel really, really solid and really, really confident. And I think that maybe makes sense. Those decks are a little easier to draft. And I think they might just be the stronger decks on average. You can get very good Lightning decks. They're a little harder to come together. But I do kind of want a few more reps on Aurora and Oscilio. I feel like I mostly get them, but there's some stuff to explore. Maybe the Mono Runeblade deck is one I can work on as well. I feel like I'm pretty close. I'm, need a few more reps, but I think that I'm going to be in a good spot by the time we get to Worlds. I'm feeling pretty confident about my draft prep, given that we have 3 weeks now.
3 weeks left. Yeah, it's coming up close.
How about you? How's your week been?
It was okay. It was really interesting. Both went to the PQ. I actually went. What was my final record? It was 3-1 in Swiss and then 2-1 in top 8. So I guess I was 5-2, and both my losses is to Yuki. Sounds close because I got to the finals, but it wasn't close because both the games I lost to Yuki, I lost by 30 life, and they were doomed games. So yeah, I needed like an Azalea to like line up 4 perfect arrows at Yuki to like beat her, and then I can beat the Azalea. So the moment that I heard Yuki won round 1 of top 8, which was her theoretically only Azalea matchup, I was like, oh, Yuki won this tournament. So it felt kind of doomed at that point.
That's fair. My game against the Enigma was actually like reasonably close. I think had he not bricked on all reds and maybe seen Mirror Guy like 1 turn sooner, he probably would have gotten there. But yeah, the Aurora deck into Count Your Blessings dash is not much of a game, unfortunately. The Arc Flicker combo with Crown of Dominion and Aether Ironweave is is kind of crazy if you're playing against a deck that just like doesn't really disrupt you much and gives you lots of time to just find it. I think I did like 40 damage to you on one of our turns in the finals.
Yeah, I think it was like maybe like a 38 damage turn, and then I prevented 12 of it, so I leaked 26.
Yeah, something like that. Not bad, not bad.
It's doomed. It's doomed. That matchup is doomed. I would not recommend playing Slapdash right now.
Yeah, I didn't think she was the best deck, but I thought she was a little better positioned than she was, and then it was like between the games that we played, I was like, oh, maybe not. And then seeing the meta breakdown for PQ Week 1, which had Aurora as the most winning deck, followed directly by Enigma, makes sense that maybe Dash isn't so good considering you're kind of doomed into both of those. I think Dash only had maybe 2 wins across the whole PQ week. So yeah, Dash probably going to be around for a while longer. Probably will live this season. I don't think anything's going to significantly shake up that meta game in the coming weeks. We do have Armory deck Dio, but I don't think Slapdash beats that deck either. So yeah, I don't think it gets better, unfortunately, for Slapdash.
No, no. Maybe the original boost dash deck gets a little bit better with the armory deck because we get like one more boost card, but I still can't really see. I can't see why you would want to play dash IE over dash IO. So yeah, I don't think I'm hoping that dash IE doesn't LL, so then I get to play her for one more season after.
I think she likely won't, but we'll see. Maybe there'll be an uptick in her wins, but I think she needs like 16 more wins. She only got 2 this week. There's 3 more weeks, so she would need to win substantially more in the coming weeks to hit Living Legend. But yeah, we do seem to be getting kind of our first looks at the CC metagame. It does seem fairly diverse, very aggro slanted with Enigma also in the mix. I'm curious to see how things will develop as we get closer to Worlds. If that Enigma representation is going to stay up there, or if the abundance of good aggro decks, especially with Dio joining the fray, is going to shake that up a little bit. I think Dash IO is looking to be like maybe just the deck to beat for Worlds. I hear so many people talking about it. I've been testing it a little bit this week, and yeah, Cerebellum Processor is a hell of a card. Getting to sit there and draw cards when you know what the top card of your deck is pretty insane, and the number of counters it has just means that it ends up staying for like multiple turns, and you can combine it with like High Octane or playing an item off the top to get your action points. It's pretty gross.
Yes, it sounds gross and it's conceptually really gross. Haven't played against it yet, so I'm kind of curious what it's going to be like in 2 weeks from now. But I think enough CC talk. You want to move right into the Oscilio?
Yeah, we can do that. Lots to cover this week. So, this is our How to Draft Oscilio guide. We're going to start by going through the cards and their block values. So, the Lightning card pool is 25 commons with 3 blocks, 15 2 blocks, 3 0 blocks, and 4 null blocks. So the null blocks are instants, the electrostatic discharge and sigils, and then the 0 blocks are the fries. So very, very poor block values. We talked about this in the Aurora episode. Your lightning cards are not where you're getting your block value from. In the rares, there are 0 3 blocks, 6 2 blocks, and 4 null blocks. Notably, 3 of those null blocks are electromagnetic somersault. Is that what the card's called? Somersault, which is a very good card and technically helps you defend. I think it's slightly less easy to use defensively in Oscilio because you're mostly just playing lightning attacks, and your wizard, like the wizard card pool, doesn't have any attacks in it. So that particular card maybe not helping out with the defensive value of the deck quite as much as it did in Aurora. And also, Oscilio is the only hero in this format that doesn't have 20 life. He has 18 life. So you are potentially pretty fragile if you have a lot of these lightning cards in your deck.
Yeah, I think every deck can kind of just like run you over if you have too many lightning cards, right? Like, I guess maybe Verdance would be the only exception, but even then, she has like the Earth cards to hit for 8 and stuff. So if you have like all lightning cards, you will die in like 2 turns, maybe 3 turns.
Yeah. So if you're playing a lightning heavy Oscilio deck, you are very much a glass cannon, but we'll talk about it. There's a few ways to draft Oscilio. Do you want to go through the wizard card pool next?
Yeah, sure. So for the wizard cards, we have 28 commons. 24 of them is 3 blocks, 3 2 blocks, and 1 no block. And then the rares, we have 6 3 blocks, 3 2 blocks, and 4 no blocks. And I guess very different from the lightning cards in the sense that like most of the wizard card actually blocks for 3. And to be honest, the 2 block wizard cards are not impressive, right? Like,
Well, exploding aether, the common is that's a 2 cost amp 3 go again. I think that card's pretty good. Mostly the red, the yellows, and the blues kind of suck.
yeah, so it's like one of the 3 2 blocks is fine, and at rare it's chorus the amphitheater.
Yeah, I don't think that card's great either.
Yeah, which is just a 2 block as well. So like,
The blue's okay because you can discard to amp 1, but like I think I overall like Arcane Twining, which blocks 3 and discards to amp 1. I know chorus affects your whole turn, so if you do like multiple spells and get action points and stuff, it's pretty cool. But I don't think I've ever seen anybody pull that off, and I've played a few decks with like a blue chorus in them, and I've never pulled it off. So I think it's relatively niche, and the 3 block is going to be more relevant most of the time.
yeah, more consistent as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think once you stop picking like yellow and blue exploding aether and like like passing up your chorus amphitheaters, almost every wizard card you're gonna end up picking is probably gonna be a 3 block, other than maybe like a save the thought and the sigils.
Yeah, yeah. So if you have a more wizard leaning Acilio deck, you can actually block pretty well, and you can play a lot like the mono wizard Verdance deck. You need some lightning cards, remember, because if you have no lightning cards, you should just be playing Verdance because, well, Volzar has no text, and you have 18 life if you're a Cilio, so you need lightning cards for it to make sense. Similar to Aurora, you need lightning cards to be Aurora. So if you're just only 30 wizard cards, you're always going to be Verdance. But you, that being said, you don't need the most lightning cards. You can probably get away with like 10-ish lightning cards and then a bunch of wizard cards and still have a good Acilio deck.
You gotta move right in and start talking about what cards we're exactly looking for to either move into Cilio or be a Cilio.
Yeah, so there's kind of 2 ways you can access Acilio, either through the Lightning Pool or the Wizard Pool. From the Lightning side, I think that the most important cards are the same ones that Aurora wants. The red Lightning starters, in particular, Fry, Lightning Surge, and Flittering Charge are very, very premium. Electrostatic Discharge is one I want to mention. I think that you can play this in your Acilio deck, but this gets a little bit of a bump down from where it is in Aurora because you need another lightning attack to pair with it. So if you are a deck that has a bunch of lightning attacks, Electrostatic Discharge, very good. If you are a deck that does not have very many lightning attacks, Electrostatic Discharge, kind of so-so. You can discard it to Acilio's ability, so it's hard to like truly brick with it, but it is overall less impressive in Acilio unless you have a ton of the red lightning go again attacks.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's also because like the wizard cards, none of the wizard cards are attacks in this set, right?
Yeah.
So it's very hard to, unlike in Aurora where you can play like a Rune Blade attack that like can get buffed. In Acilio, Discharge doesn't buff any of the wizard cards, so there's gonna be a lot of turns where it just like kind of gets stuck in your arsenal or gets stuck in your hand.
And then the other lightning card that you really want in Acilio that I think is a much higher pick than it is in Aurora is the Sigil of Lightning or the Sigil of Conductivity. That's the conductivity is the rare arcane shelter one sigil that makes an embodiment when it leaves, and Sigil of Lightning is at the start of your turn. It breaks and makes an embodiment of lightning. Those cards are really, really good for a few reasons. Um, for one, it already amps 1 and pays for your Volzar, so you can kind of like play it, Volzar Zap as like a 4 damage play that is arcane and so sort of similar to Verdance's play, except that you also get the embodiment of lightning for your next turn, which helps because, as you might have noticed, there's not that many lightning attacks with Go Again. If you're mostly looking for Fry, Lightning Surge, and Flittering Charge, that's a pretty small card pool. But if you do have access to your sigils, it can make the cards like Heaven's Claws or your Trip the Light Fantastics into go again attacks as well, which is something Oscilio is pretty interested in. So I think that those lightning sigils are actually really important for Oscilio in a way that they're playable but just sort of okay in Aurora.
Okay, that's really interesting. That's really interesting. Is it? Does this mean that like for each sigil that you want, maybe like one lightning card without go again, or is it like a something that's like completely separate?
Yeah, it is something like that. You want a balance of them. Honestly, like having it doesn't have to be exactly one to one, because like sometimes you have a lightning surge in your hand and you just want to be able to play it out, and having that consistency helps. Sigil of Lightning is also like a great way to turn on your flittering charges, so it doesn't have to be exactly one to one, but you do want a mix of sigils and red lightning attacks. So if you already have like two sigils and you don't have many red lightning attacks and you're picking between a red lightning attack or a sigil, you take the red lightning attack. But if you have like 7 red lightning attacks and you see your first sigil, you probably want to take the sigil over another red lightning attack. So it's kind of like that. You want a little bit of a balance. I would say like roughly maybe like 2 red lightning attacks per blue sigil. It feels about right. And if you do have those sigils, you can also play some stuff like a Findle's Fighting Spirit is totally fine. As just like a when you get like a Findle's Fighting Spirit with go again, and then you zap them or do basically anything else, it's pretty good.
Then what about the wizard section? How do we get into Cilio from the wizard card pool?
Yeah, so the biggest priority is probably the same as Verdance. It's all the go again wizard stuff. So that's Trailblazing Aether and Aether Quickening, which is the zap and Scalding Rain that has Surge go again. And then Exploding Aether, which is the 2 for amp 3 go again that blocks 2. Yeah, a lot of the same stuff. You really want these cards because they let you present a bunch of arcane all in one turn, which is very, very good. And I think Oscilio is maybe even better than Verdance at burning people out because Volzar just amps so much potentially that you can really present a ton of arcane very quickly. Aside from those, a card that goes up in Oscilio is Etchings of Arcana. This is a zap that surges to return a sigil from your graveyard to your hand. And this combos really well with your Sigils of Lightning or your Sigils of Conductivity because you can either play them out. If you have an arsenal already, you can play them out and start the next turn with an embodiment. So it's like Surge on hit Embodiment of Lightning, which is pretty strong. And if you don't have an arsenal, you can actually arsenal that Sigil of Lightning and potentially even get like a maybe turn on a flittering charge, maybe get a Volzar activation out of it, and all of that is very, very nice. The other card that combos with this that we touched on in the Verdance video is the Sigil of Temporal Manipulation. This is the wizard rare that basically gives you a Kano activation off the top, where you can look at the top card. If it's a non-attack, you banish it, and then if it's a non-attack, you can play it this turn as though it were an instant. This card has gone up for me if you are in Mono Wizard Verdance or if you are in Oscilio, and particularly when you have it in combinations with Etchings of Arcana. Because when you start recurring this card with Etchings of Arcana and then playing it out and getting it multiple times, it gets really out of control really quickly. So I think that, the Etchings with the Sigils is like a pretty key synergy piece that you don't have to have in your deck, but ideally you do.
Okay, that's an interesting way to use temporal manipulation. Is it more of like, I guess if you're doing this, you're gonna be trying to burn out your opponent before you get to the fatigue? Because temporal manipulation, as we said last week, isn't really a good fatigue math card, right?
Yeah. It's mostly just to overload them with arcane damage and run them over, which I think is your primary plan as Acilio. You can set up some pitch stack combos and things like that. Honestly, I think most of the best pitch stack relying on Surge and opponents potentially getting to sit on Prevention to deny that plan makes me want to pressure them first to hopefully get their macro and have like first cycle pressure be your primary game plan, and then your pitch stack and second cycle be like your backup win con that you can kind of do on the fly rather than like the main focus of the deck.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Any other cards that we're looking for Cilio?
Zaps and red spells in general. The Scalding Rains are actually pretty good in Acilio, especially if you are light on sigils. Something like maybe you have an embodiment, you go Heaven's Claw with go again, activate Volzar, Scalding Rain. That's like 5 and 5 off of 3 cards if you have the embodiment. just like a super solid turn. So I think Volzar costing 1 and you wanting some 1-cost attacks means that the Scalding Rains can fit into your curve a little more naturally than Inverdants, and I'm pretty happy to play those. But the zaps are still very good as well. You can also just go red line, and especially if you have the lightning sigils, you can just play pitchless too, which is also really strong. After that, the gloves hold focus. We talked about these Inverdants. Just the amp 1 on board is so huge. Access to those, like pushing your surge effects and either guaranteeing them or making them really hard to deny, is really strong. And then finally, as with basically all the heroes, the meld card Comet Storm is a real house. I think Comet Storm might be one of the best meld cards.
It's the most impactful.
Yeah, yeah,
Arkancy's life is kind of up there too, though.
yeah. They're honestly all pretty good, but Comet Storm, yeah, Comet Storm is pretty crazy. You can play it as a 2 for 5. You can play it as a 2 for 5 and a 1 arcane ping, or you can potentially pay 5 and amp it as well, because you can pay both modes. The instant half is a lightning card, so you can Volzar and amp it. And yeah, Comet Storm just gives you a ton of burst to close out the game. And the decks with Comet Storm are notably stronger than the decks without Comet Storm, I would say. It's like a huge amount of win percentage to your deck if you have Comet Storm.
Yeah, the card actually just gives so much reach to Oscilio that like typically it like swings the life differential, right? Like the hardest part about Oscilio would be like the 18 life and that you are a little bit more fragile than the other heroes in the set. But if your life total are kind of close and get to like the 5 to 5 range, if you just Comet Storm and then amp it, it's really hard for your opponent to win at that point.
Yeah, sometimes even if you don't actually kill them, you take like maybe they have their sanctuary up, you take so many cards that they go low and then they can't pressure your hand, and then you just finish them with a zap or something similar. A way to think about Comet Storm is if you pitch 2 blues to it and you get the 5 and 2, you've done 7 arcane, which is basically like your your Scalding Rain with your Exploding Aether combo, assuming that you get the red like, except that one's like a 2-card combo, right? Like you need the Exploding Aether and the Scalding Rain, whereas for this one, like all you need is 2 blues or even a blue and a yellow with your Comet Storm, and you can just do a 7. And you can also do it as a 5 off of 1 blue, and you can also do it off a 6 off of blue and a red. So it's just like more flexible and doesn't need to line up as much. Yeah, card is really good. Turn 0 Comet Storm, also very good.
Nah, that's the most unfair thing. It's like turn 0 Comet Storm, and you look at your hand, and it's like, I have 2 reds in this hand. I guess I only prevent 4.
Yeah, yeah. Oscilio's scary. The good Oscilio decks are really scary. They can just present so much arcane and kind of kill you out of nowhere. So yeah, those are the key cards. So you'll notice here there's a lot of overlap between like the arcane verdants and the lightning reds for Aurora. So you can kind of access the deck either way. You get deep into lightning cards and then you see wizard cards open, or you get deep into the wizard cards and have some lightning cards to supplement. I think both are reasonable ways to get into the deck.
Let's talk about the overrated and the underrated cards. You want to start with the overrated cards first?
Yeah, so the first one is the non-lightning sigils. We talked about how good the lightning sigils are, and temporal manipulation gets a pass. I think basically all the other sigils are kind of junky. The wizard sigil that makes a ponder is, even though it pays for your Volzar, is just not really where you want to be. You can play it, it's okay, but I'd much rather have a blue 3 block than it. And any of the 2 block non-instant sigils, like the Sigil of Cycles and the Sigil of Findle, I personally haven't really been impressed with. So I think you basically want Lightning Sigils, Temporal Manipulation, and the M that does 1 Arcane, that one's also good, but I think those are the only sigils you really want in your Oscilio deck.
Oh yeah, clearly the mythic, the majestic is the one that's okay, right? Yeah, yeah.
Oh, his spec is good too. His spec is good too.
Oh yeah, yeah. The other M, yeah, yeah. Clearly.
Yeah, but as far as the commons go, like you don't really want them aside from the Lightning Sigil. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. And any of the other cards, like what about Open the Floodgates? We haven't talked about that yet, and I think early in the format, people were talking about how we can open the floodgates, maybe the way to use Oscilio. How do you think about that card now?
I think it's maybe a little bit overrated. So the combo is if you have flash, any color of flash with open the floodgates, and you amp or open the floodgates, you get the draw two, and then you get the action point or the go again from the flash, and then you can do like a follow up and get an arsenal or something. I've played with this combo in my deck a few times, and honestly, I think it's kinda not good. You can do worse than it. Like, I'm not saying never pick these cards, but don't pick them highly because the problem is that a lot of stronger decks and stronger players it will end up saving their Sanctuary of Aria for your surge effects. Like especially if they have life gain on turn zero, they'll be like, okay, I'll just sit here and gain some life, eat your arcane damage, and then save my Sanctuary for your surge effects. And then anytime you try to go like flash open the floodgates for four, and they're just like, Sanctuary, okay, you spent three cards for four arcane damage, and I'm gonna like prevent some of that. Anything else here? It's like even if you follow up with a zap, it's like okay, you did like a four card seven. Like it's just unacceptable even for arcane damage. So I think the amount of counterplay there is really tough. And then when you play against the lightning heroes, it's like they might have twinkle toes on board, or they might just have like a trip in their hand, and you always have to be like, can I beat them like randomly having Trip the Light Fantastic in their hand? And like the answer is often no. So I don't know. Open the floodgates. I've seen it do some good things. I've done some good things with it. But the more and more I play with it, the more I'm like, huh, this sure does block three.
Okay, yeah. I guess it still does block three, so that's the plus side of it. And I guess you're saying that it's overdrafted a little bit and maybe come down in some people's pick lists.
Yeah, I think it's like I think you can include this in your Oscilio deck. It's fine. It blocks three, and like the blue flashes, especially, are like you can play blue flash, no problem. It's a pitch card. It works with open the floodgates. That's pretty reasonable. But I don't think you want to be picking these like super highly. You want to be like wheeling these because you're Oscilio, I think, or picking them late in the pack when there's not much else.
Okay, that makes sense. And I see one more card on this list here. It's called Glyph Overlay. I've never seen this card be good. Like the text on this card is so hard to pull off, right?
Yeah, so glyph overlay being the thing about it is okay, it's a one for three. It gets plus one for each sigil that you have, and then if it surges, you gain a life and you put the sigils to the bottom. So you always get the gain a life. So when it surges, it's like kind of a scalding rain if you can make it surge, which is like okay. So it's not terrible, but it's not great. And then if you have the sigils, you do get extra damage out of having those sigils on board. However, we just talked about how you don't really want many sigils in your deck. So the problem ends up being like maybe you have a sigil and that sigil gives it plus one. So then it's a one for four. And then if you surge, you like get the life gain. But like it's basically just like marginally better than a scalding rain in that scenario. And anytime you don't have a scalding rain, it's like kind of just a one for three. So I don't want to say that you like can't play this card or it's like bad. I think it's still like a red spell. It's still okay, but it is. I think it's easy for this card to look really cool and like it does a lot of stuff, and like really it's just kind of mediocre. Like I think I would rather just take a scalding rain over it, honestly.
Okay, like you would rather have the consistent four damage to rely on than having to work for it.
Yeah. But like there's like a yellow zap or a red glyph overlay. Yeah, I'll probably take the red glyph overlay, but it's just like not. It's certainly not a reason to be a Cilio, I don't think, and I just don't think it's like a very high pick in general.
Okay, that makes sense. Then let's talk about the underrated cards. I kind of love this list right now. The list just says block threes.
I think people try to put too many like lightning blues, blue zaps, sigils in their Acilio deck, and then they're like, "Oh, I'm an 18 life hero and I can't defend." When you just have a bunch of block threes in your deck, you're so much more stable. And I think being an 18 life hero makes it even more important to have those block threes. You often want to play a longer game because even though you are burning them out with arcane, even if you're doing 7 arcane a turn, they have some prevention that's going to take you 4 turns to get there, probably, right? Like 3 turns, 21 damage. You're never getting there through their Aria. So you kind of need to play like at least 4 turns, which means you need to be doing some blocking because all they need to do is like swing 7 back at you. And if you can't block on it, you're just going to fall behind. So I think you really need block threes in this deck.
Okay, that makes sense. And basically any of the block threes are good, I guess, compared to a block two.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like ideally, you're playing like blue and red block threes, which means like the wizard cards. That is obviously the ideal, but yeah, just in general, like try to avoid, especially in your blue base, all those random block twos and block zeros that you could be playing, like the sigils, and just get lots of nice 3 blocks.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. I'm a big fan of three blocks. So you know what? I can't disagree with this. So that's it for the overrated and underrated cards. Uh, did you want to do like a quick rundown of the key cards before we move on to the gameplay?
Yeah, so we can just do a summary of what we talked about. If you're a Cilio, you want the usual good wizard stuff. So your Surge, Go Agains, and Exploding Aethers. You can play a package with Sigil of Lightning and Etchings of Arcana, or Sigil of Temporal Manipulation and Etchings of Arcana to recur those and get card advantage. Surge, essentially draw a card, is very powerful. And other than those red spells and stuff like your signpost card Comet Storm, you really need some lightning cards to supplement it. So your red lightning starters and blue lightning sigils, because again, if you have no lightning cards, you should just be Verdance. Your weapon actually does something and you get 20 life. So you do need the lightning cards to be Oscilio. I have seen some decks that are like almost entirely wizard with like 1 to 2 Comet Storm shocks, and I think that might actually potentially be worth it. But yeah, that's like a bit of a side note, especially if you have 2.
Okay, yeah, that's a really good reason to be an Acilio. Two Comet Storms and just rest wizard cards. Yeah, I'd definitely want to be Acilio over Verdance for Comet Storms.
Yeah, and there's nothing to say like even if that's your deck, you can't like maybe you get like 1 red lightning surge, 1 red fry or something, and then like yeah, it's like pretty reasonable. Like you can be very wizard heavy, but you want some amount of the lightning cards. Or if you're literally just 30 wizard cards that aren't Comet Storm, like you have no business being a Celio.
Yeah, if you're just Verdance, you get 2 more life. 2 more life. That's a lot.
And a weapon.
And a weapon, yes, and you get to amp. Wow. Just the mono wizard Verdance deck seems so much better than just playing Acilio. Even if you have like both the lightning equipment, that's not gonna. You're getting 2 prevention from Twinkle Toes and 1 block from the helmet, so you're 21 life over 20.
Yeah, and you have to work for the Twinkle Toes.
Ooh, okay, so yeah, like I'd rather try and like pick up our runaways and like V Verdance at that point, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I think that there is room for good Acilio decks, and the good Acilio decks can be pretty strong, but they need the right cards, and that is the mix of the red lightning and the red wizard cards. And what you might notice here is we talked a bit about Aurora and how she really needs red cards to function, like the red lightning cards, because the difference between like a 4 and a 3 is just so big. Acilio has the same thing with the red lightning card pool, where like the non-reds are not very good, but he also kind of has it with the wizard card pool too. The blue 3 blocks are fine, but they're not winning you the game because most of them do 1 or 2 damage. So you really need red lightning spells and red wizard spells. And if you don't have both of those things, you probably don't have a good Acilio deck. And I think that this is the reason that Acilio is the one that is the most prone to being overdrafted and is the one that really, really needs to be open. Because if you don't have the card quality in Acilio, like you're just not going to get there. And you have 18 life too. Like it's just yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think this is very I think in this format in general, the lightning heroes are a little bit weaker, just in the sense of like because when you open packs, there's going to be a yellow lightning card or a blue lightning card in those packs, and the difference between how playable an earth yellow card is and a yellow lightning card is just so much greater that there should probably be a little bit more earth drafters than lightning drafters. And if the pod evens out that way, then lightning decks can be quite good if there's like 3 lightning players and 5 earth players, I think.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's usually how the pod shakes out. If the lightning decks are good, it's like 2 or 3. If there's like 2 lightning decks, they're probably both very good. And if there's 3, then it depends on how deep the particular pod's card pool is for lightning, but they can potentially all be good. But as soon as you get to like 4 and 4, I think Earth has a pretty big edge. And I think this is kind of reflected. Like a lot of people have a preference for Earth. Earth is more easier to get into and more prone to being like heavily contested. So I do think it is a little self-correcting. So all these things we're saying about lightning is not saying don't draft lightning. I draft lightning a fair bit. It's just saying make sure you're drafting lightning because it's open and you're getting reds. Don't draft a bunch of yellow lightning cards and yellow wizard cards and then realize, oh, my Oscilio deck doesn't do anything.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay, then perfect. You want to move on to how Oscilio actually plays during a game?
Yeah, so in a lot of ways, he can play very similar to Arcane Verdance, where you block and take it slow, and then you go Zap or Exploding Aether plus Scalding Rain. You can do that same kind of classic, just like poking gameplay. And the big thing that differentiates Oscilio from Verdance is you can make a couple big turns with your lightning cards where you perhaps amp a bunch and play multiple lightning attacks, and those turns are really, really scary. So to give you like a sample turn, maybe you go like Lightning Surge from Arsenal for 4 go again, Flittering Charge for 4, flash in a Lightning Sigil to give Flittering Charge go again. You activate Volzar for 3 because you have a Lightning Sigil. You've amped 3, and then you can zap them for 6. So you've done 4 physical, 4 physical, 6 arcane. And you're trying to set up something kind of like this. And you get an embodiment. So that's like crazily above rate. Half of it's arcane, and there's breakpoints in there too. And you're trying to set up like 1 or 2 turns like this, in addition to the poking wizard gameplay where you just chip them and like finish them off with a zap. So you have 1 or 2 very explosive turns, and then a lot of chipping.
Yeah, and that explosive turn was a 4 card hand you just explained, right? So you could have also blocked for 3 on the same turn cycle. So it could have been like an easily 8 plus 6 is 14 plus a 3 block 17. It's worth 17 off a.
Off the 5 cards, yeah. And you get the embodiment for your next turn too. Or you can go the other way, like you add a fry in there. You go like lightning surge, fry, flittering charge, flash in a sigil, zap. There's like different permutations, but typically when you go, the thing about the lightning go agains with Volzar is like basically every time you do a lightning go again, if you're activating Volzar, you're basically getting like +1 from that card. So your lightning surges are essentially like 0 for 5s, your fries are 0 for 4s, and your flittering charges are 0 for 5s. And the 1 extra damage you're getting isn't just 1 extra damage; it's 1 extra arcane damage. So it's even like harder to block and even better.
Yeah. Typically, when an Acilio does that play, you end up having to have to block with your whole hand, and then
Yep.
you just need to hope that the Acilio can't convert the next 4 cards.
And that's part of the reason the embodiments are so helpful. They help you set up these turns, and they also help you kind of keep these turns rolling for next turn. So yeah, that's kind of like what you're aiming for in a nutshell. I think that it is possible to also be more red line, where you have just a lot of lightning attacks and you have a ton of go again, and you're just going like you're just trying to play a bunch of lightning cards and end on a zap like basically every turn. um, I have built out decks like that, like in theory, when I was first looking at the set, but I think in practice it's very hard for it to come together because you just need so many lightning reds. But I mean, if people are passing you like 12 plus lightning reds that have lots of go again, like you take those and your deck's going to be insane. But I think most of the time that's not what you're going to draft.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. And I guess the last question would be, how often do you activate Acilio's text? Like, do you ever discard and draw a card off Acilio?
Yeah, so I would say it's like somewhere between 0 and 2 times per game on average, usually 0 or 1. What you might have been noticing from all the things that we're talking about is that I really like the block threes to make the deck a little bit more stable, and I don't like having many of the block zeros like the sigils and even electrostatic discharge, which is a good card. because it requires other attacks and you're playing fewer attacks to begin with, you don't want as many of those either. So as a result, you actually just don't have that many instants to discard. But that being said, if you find yourself in a spot where your hand would improve a lot by cycling that instant, that's totally a reasonable thing to do. Maybe you're digging for a 3 block or digging for a blue or digging for a spell. Like maybe you have lots of lightning go again, and you're like, I don't really need a second. I don't really need this like second lightning sigil. I just need any spell to capitalize on the amp.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So you're not really relying on his hero ability then.
No, it's more like you can use it to fix a hand occasionally, and it does mean to some extent that like having, if your Oscilio deck is like 29 good cards and then you have like a yellow electrostatic discharge you have to put in your deck, it's actually not a disaster because like you can just use it for a yellow pitch or an amp one in a pinch, or you can just discard it and get a new card. So if you are like slightly short on playables, having like an extra 1 or 2 instants that are kind of dead is like, it means you'll be more vulnerable for fatigue, but yeah, it's kind of acceptable.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Then, do you want to move on and talk about the deck outline? How many of each kind of card are you really looking for in this deck?
Yep. So you want 8 to 10 blues. You want these to ideally be mostly 3 blocks with, I'm going to say, as many sigils as you can get. You probably don't need more than like 4 of them. And we talked about having that balance, maybe roughly like 2 to 1 of the lightning attacks to the sigils. But yeah, basically as many lightning sigils as you can get, and then the rest blue 3 blocks. After that, you want lightning starters. I think ideally 6+, sort of similar to Aurora, and generally more is better. Other than your lightning cards, you want as many red zaps and scalding rains as you can, comet storm as well if you can, of course. And the ones that you're looking for in particular are the go again surges, the exploding ethers, and maybe the etchings of arcana if you have a bunch of sigils. And don't be afraid to include a card like Findle's Fighting Spirit as a 3 for 7 that you can give go again with embodiments, assuming that you have like the sigils to make the embodiments. So playing a couple of Findle's Fighting Spirits is pretty okay, just as like a 2 card 8 that also kind of blocks 3 because you're usually lower life than your opponent as a Cilio, and if you're not, you're probably winning by a lot. So
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Pretty simple deck outline too, right? Like it's not like some of the other heroes. There isn't that many builds of Oscilio. Is that true?
yeah, I think that like Oscilio decks can look a little bit different, but you kind of want the right, you kind of still want the same cards, and you want like a mix of the lightning cards and the spells, and you can like slide more one way or slide more the other way. Like I think you can probably be anywhere from like, let's say like 20-ish, maybe like 18 to 20, maybe like 18 lightning cards and 12 wizard cards, all the way down to like maybe like 8 to 10 lightning cards and then 20 to 22 wizard cards to fill it out. So you can lean more one way or the other, but I think regardless of which way you lean, you kind of want the same cards. And if you have more wizard cards, you have a little bit of a slower game plan and more blocking. And if you have more lightning cards, you're more of an aggro game plan and you're more explosive. But regardless, like you always need the mix because the way that Oscilio gets big value is by amping Arcane with his weapon.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Like Volzar is the reason to be Oscilio. It's not his text box. It's not because you get 18 life. It's not because wow, lightning and wizard cards are broken. It's because Volzar is a hell of a weapon, and Comet Storm is a very good card.
Okay, yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I guess next would be, are you trying to go first or second with this deck? You're a lightning hero, so I think a lot of people's like initial take would be like to go second and play your whole hand out.
I think similar to Verdance, the Arcane Verdance, you almost always want to go first because you're so good at presenting arcane damage. You can potentially play sigils to get extra value, and if you just like hit them for like 5 on their first turn and make them start lower than you and have like a sigil in play, that's a big win. Like maybe you go like Sigil of Lightning, Scalding Rain, Amp Volzar. Here's 5. And if they start at 15, you're pretty happy. If they give you their sanctuary to get value, which they often will because they're expecting you to be explosive, that's also a really big win because it often means that your future surges are kind of online for free and you don't have to worry about it. So you can reliably, like, I don't know, if I can surge my Trailblazing Aether, I know I'm going to be able to follow up with this zap and I don't have to sit there and wonder, like, can I afford to hold this zap and hope that I don't get blown out by them preventing it, kind of a thing. So you just, yeah, getting the sanctuary is like already a huge win, just like it is for mono wizard verdants.
Okay, that makes sense. So you do just want to go first with Oscilio. Yeah, I guess this is the first format where we kind of have like this. You might actually just want to go first with most of the heroes in this set, except for Aurora, right?
Yeah, and Aurora is the one matchup where I'm not sure. You might want to go second. I think especially if your hand is, I think like the more that you are good at converting big hands, the more you want to go second, and the more that you're like doing lots of arcane and chipping them, probably the more you want to go first. Sometimes going second against Aurora is a little scary. If she can just convert like her whole hand on offense at the start and just do like 13 or something, it's a little bit of a rough place to be as a Cilio. You're if you have 3 blocks, it does help, but yeah, just starting at 18 life, and if Aurora has a really hot start and a very good deck, it can be tough. So I think that, yeah, I think that if the more explosive your deck is, the more you want to go second against Aurora, and the slower it is, the more you want to go first. But yeah, just be aware that Aurora going second can be very scary. So if you know their deck's probably really strong, you might not want to let them go second.
Then let's talk about the exact matchups a little bit more in detail. And as always, let's start with the Florian matchup.
So you can chip them a lot with Arcane. Arcane's really good early, especially if they want to decompose and they're playing Earth cards, which usually most Florians are. Just basically not letting them block to fill their yard can be really good. That being said, if you have a really good lightning turn with like lightning go again, lightning go again, lightning go again amp, like you play out the turn. You don't not play it to deny them, but it's just yeah, preference for arcane early if you're not giving up too much, and then you're looking for that 1 or 2 big turns of setup. Or I've also had games where the Florian just clearly doesn't really have life gain, and you can just keep throwing arcane at them, and they just kind of fall over, and those kind of feel like free wins. So if they don't have any life gain and they're not really staying in the game, just keep zapping them. Otherwise, set up your big turn. And maybe a tip: don't be afraid to block and slow the game down, and just keep chipping them slowly. Often Florian decks might have trouble converting more than like 6 to 7 damage on offense. So if you're sitting there blocking 2 cards and then sending some arcane every turn, like you have a pretty stable game plan so long as they don't have enough life gain to survive.
That makes sense. Then what happens if they do have the life gain?
You really need that big turn, basically. Yeah, you need the big turns to get over life gain. This actually happened in our recent armory draft. We had actually a patron visiting from out of town. He just happened to be in Vancouver, came to a local armory, smashed our armory on Florian, actually. So shout out to Josh. But anyways, yeah, he basically just sat there and gained 3 life and swung 7 every single turn, and I ran out of damage in my deck and I fatigued. So yeah, it is like a pretty real win con for Florian. I think that like a big thing in that game was that my lightning cards all wound up at the bottom of my deck. And by the time I got to them, I was both low on life total and low on red spells, so I wasn't really able to set up the big turn. I maybe could have played towards a pitch stack a little bit, I'm not sure, but it also felt like I was kind of close to burning him out, so I just kept going for that. But yeah, I think I really needed to be getting the amp out of my lightning spells to get that, or the lightning attacks to get that tempo, and to also just like get that little bit more arcane to finish him off, because I did get him pretty low. I just couldn't quite get there.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Okay, then what about Verdance? Verdance is the other Earth hero.
Honestly, it's kind of the same. If they're Earth, all the same things apply. Chip them slowly, deny decompose, set up a big turn, and don't be afraid to slow the game down. If they are on Wizard pile, you basically want to prioritize Arcane as much, because they are probably also happy to sit there and block. If you have things like prevention effects and arcane polarities, that helps a lot. Um, and you ideally do want to set up that really, really big lightning turn, because Verdance generally has basically like Verdance has more access to life gain and more life total than you do. So if you basically need to have like the explosive lightning turns to outpace the mono wizard Verdance. Otherwise, like she's just going to do the same thing back, and you're going to fall behind. So yeah.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So it's just like the mirror, but they have more life than you.
Kinda, yeah. They're much more predictable than you. Like they can't just like explode you nearly as well as Verdant. Like Verdance is usually not as good at exploding you as Oscilio is. But yeah, more life gain. So you do need to kind of like push through and find a way to end the game pretty quickly. So yeah, the explosiveness is pretty big there.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's move on to the lightning hero, Aurora. How do we beat Aurora?
I think that because Aurora is an aggro deck, you care a lot less about your evasive damage, so your zaps, and more about your value per card and like your hand-to-hand efficiency. So you're really playing more of a traditional value game. I think that the mono wizard, like the closer you are to mono wizard Acilio, the harder this matchup is for you, assuming that their deck is good, because you're just kind of below rate and you're just poking them. You really do need some of the explosive lightning draws to keep pace with Aurora and Racer. And also stuff like Findle's Fighting Spirit is really good because, well, it's a 2 card 8. We like 2 card 8s. Um, but yeah, you're really just playing like a traditional aggro mirror where you just maximize value. Don't be afraid to block. You do block very well. Like I think you probably block a little better than them, which is nice. But yeah, you need to find some way to pull ahead in the value game.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Then let's move on to the mirror. What do we do in the mirror?
Go first. Uh, Honestly, like I think going first is like maybe one of the biggest swings in the mirror. You're both kind of trying to do the same thing. If you are both on arcane damage and not much else, going first is a huge edge. If it is not like that, and you actually have some lightning attacks, you can potentially catch up by finding a very large lightning turn to blow them up. But yeah, going first is really, really good in the mirror. Other mirror breakers are things like Trip the Light Fantastic and Arcane Polarity. If you can find a couple of these throughout the draft to bring them in, it will give you a huge amount of edge into Acilio and also into Arcane Verdance as well. So look for some prevention and some polarities. Um, Brush Off and Twinkle Toes also helps. And other than that, just remember they're probably doing a lot of arcane just like you are. So if you want to block, you should be blocking early, deny their second strikes if they're playing them. I don't think you really want second strike in Acilio because it's like hard to have that much go again, but still deny their second strikes in case they're playing them. And sometimes don't be afraid to overblock. Like if you're pretty sure they're not gonna, like if your hand like really just wants to block out, it's okay to block 2 cards on 4 if you don't think they're going to go too wide.
Yeah, I think that's also just like a very common thing that happens in this format, mostly against the Wizards, is if they start with like a go again attack, you kind of just want to overblock it because if they just don't play another attack afterwards, it feels like you kind of got like owned and you just like leaked 1 damage for no reason. And the more you can prevent that, the higher win percentage gets in this format. And then there's also a fine balance of like not doing it too much or you just end up fatiguing, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I guess like this is sort of a common thread against the wizard decks, but the more you can convert your hand, the better you're going to do in the mirror. So like if you can convert your hand against them just sending pure arcane, you're probably pretty happy. So whether that's like Trip the Light Fantastics and Life Gain are ways to do that, whether that's lightning cards with Go Again are good ways to do that, or maybe not the most exciting way, but if you have some of those amp one, discard amp one spells, that can still be a way to get something out of your hand, and it's a lot better than doing nothing. So like, if all you can do is like Scalding Rain and discard 2 cards in amp 2, like at least you're getting 6 arcane. That's a lot better than just doing 4 and then IPing 2. Like it's not really a game that comes down to fatigue. It's more just like finding as much arcane damage as fast as you can.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, I think that's basically everything we wanted to say about Acilio. It was a quicker episode than usual. I think it's because there really isn't too much extra going on with Acilio compared to the other heroes in the format, right?
Yeah, I think he is a blend of Aurora and Arcane Verdance. and a lot of the concepts that we talked about there apply here. But I still think he's pretty hard to play and quite hard to draft. So if you're wanting to draft Oscilio at your PQs, I'd encourage you to try and get some practice either at your armories or on Runaways server or something like that. Because even if there's maybe a little bit less to talk about, I think it's more because like what the Oscilio decks want is pretty clear and less to do with like the gameplay or the actual drafting process not being hard. I think those parts are pretty hard.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Navigating the Cilio turns can be difficult. Yeah, it's knowing when to block and knowing when not to block can be very tricky. And I think Oscilio is one of those heroes where, because so much of its damage is evasive, right? Like you can't really just be like, "Oh, this is like the most efficient turn all the time." You have to be like, "How do I win this game?" more than like, "How do I be more efficient than my opponent?" Because honestly, you just usually aren't more efficient than your opponent, right?
Yeah, yeah. You're often kind of like sneaking out games with some with some burn. Like you kind of get them a little bit low, and then you just start zapping them, or like you get them low, you comet storm them, they go to one, and then you're just like, all I need to do is hold a zap. Please don't kill me, and then you get there. There's a lot of games like that.
It's I think my experience playing against Cecilio all the time is that you feel like you're winning against Cecilio, and then they do something, and you're just like, where did I lose from? Like it's like what just happened? Like I'm just dead now. Like I thought like they just like IP2'd themselves. Like what happened? Why am I dead now?
Yeah, or you just continue to feel like you're winning the whole time, and then you're like, huh, what does their deck do? That's the other experience playing against Acilio.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. You hit them, and then you're just like, oh, maybe it's mistake to go down to like 5 or 6, end up overwalking, and then like you just keep on hitting them. You're just like, wait, I just won the game with like 13 life. What happened?
Yeah, yeah. I think Acilio decks might have like the lowest floor. Like a bad Acilio deck is really bad. Um, it's like almost unplayable. Like I think a bad Acilio deck is probably like the easiest way to O3 a draft.
That's yeah. You know what? Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. But it's also like a good hero to potentially like spike a PQ draft too, right?
Yeah, yeah. I think the good Acilio decks will like basically 2-1 or 3-0 all of the time. I think I might need to work on Acilio a little more because I've mostly gotten 2-1s. I may have gotten 1-3-0 on Acilio, or maybe I've just drafted decks that I think are definitely capable of 3-0ing but haven't gotten the 3-0. But I would like to get a couple more reps on him. But I do feel like overall pretty figured out. And I do think this is kind of what Acilio decks look like, even judging by like other decks I've seen other people playing. I don't think that there's much that we're missing here.
The one thing to say about Oscilio would be like the cards that we talk about are kind of narrow, which is why the episode is kind of short. But what that also means that there's not that many cards you want to be picking up for Cilio that like can like lead you into it, right? Like you need to have like the specific red lightning cards, you need to have the specific red wizard cards. So then those cards drying up fast will be like a good way to like move you away from Acilio as well. But if you stick to it too long, then that's an easy way to go 1-2-0-3, I think. It's kind of like unfortunate that like some of these like yellows and the blues, or just like the yellow lightning cards, the blue lightning cards are like kind of so bad in Acilio that like I wish the pack coalition was like a little bit more slanted towards like reds in lightning or something like that. So
I
then
agree.
these decks can be more functional. It's just like how sets are designed in Flesh and Blood. Like I know we can't do that right now, but it feels like, man, like why do we need yellow fry in this set, or like why do we need yellow flash in this set? Like we don't need some of these cards, and like I kind of wish that they were just like, oh, like this set doesn't have yellow of some of these cards. But I know for probably like set design reasons that they won't do that.
Yeah, yeah. I think I agree with all of that. Maybe I think you highlighted a good something that I also want to touch on too, which is um, I think that Oscilio is a little bit deceptive. Where I think you can kind of convince yourself that the like yellow fries and yellow lightning surges are good. Like I did this early in the format, is why I mention it. Because you're just like, well, Bullseye adds +1 value, so your fries are 0 for 3s, and then your lightning surges are 0 for 4s. The problem is like your wizards cards also aren't above rates, so it's like your wizard card's 3, and you kind of want to be like adding on to that 3. So like I don't know, like if you're just like going like 2 go again, 3 go again, amp here's 5, it's like not that good.
Yeah, you not being able to leak damage for the breakpoints
Yeah.
is kind of a big deal.
Yeah, it kind of matters like a lot. And because you have 18 life and because those cards don't block, it's like even more like it all compounds on itself where like you don't have that many life points to be playing your good turns. And if your good turns are like yellow lightning cards into like a zap, like you're just not really getting there and making up that life lead. You really do mostly need the reds. That doesn't mean like don't play yellow lightning surge or don't play fries. You just don't want very many of them in your deck.
Yeah, I don't. I feel maybe a better way of saying that would be like you don't want to go into Celio for those cards.
Yeah. Yeah. I find usually the way I draft Acilio is I'm really, really deep, usually in Wizard, honestly, but sometimes Lightning. Like, I guess if you just get the draft where you get to go super deep on Lightning. I don't know if this has happened for me yet, to be honest. I've seen other people get this seat. I never seem to. Like, I've tried. I'll start taking Lightning cards, and it's like, yep, person's passing to me is in Lightning. So I don't know if I've actually had this draft, but I think that theoretically, if you could get deep into Lightning and have good Lightning reds, you could go that way, or you could like start with like maybe I get like 2 good lightning reds, then I go really deep on wizard, and then I make sure that lightning's open, and then I can be Ocilio. But usually you want to be deep in one of the card pools because I think it's like a good thing in general in this format, but it's even more important in Ocilio because like if you have a lot of lightning cards, you can still pivot to Aurora if you're not getting the wizard cards, or the wizard cards are yellows and blues mostly. And similarly, if you have lots of wizard cards, you can always ditch your lightning cards and just go verdants. And that's sort of like your safety valves for this deck. And I think that because the floor on Acilio is so low, you kind of need those backup plans.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, I think that's kind of everything we wanted to talk about, right?
Yeah, I think so. We have a draft PQ coming up this weekend. Definitely looking forward to that. And I know some other people have been, talking about their draft PQs and getting ready for them, which is very cool. So yeah, best of luck to everyone at their draft PQs. Check out On the Bobble Discord and Patreon if you want more information about draft. We also have videos on YouTube. And I hope that you enjoyed listening to this episode. If you want to get in touch with us, you can email us directly at onthebobble@gmail.com, or you can find us on Twitter. Jay is at UetaJ, and I'm at YukiLeeBender. That's going to be a wrap for now. And yeah, best of luck to all of you at your PQs. Hope you enjoy drafting or playing Classic Constructed in Rosetta.
Yeah. Do you have any sign offs or things you want to talk about this week? Oh, you know what? I do. I have something I want to say.
Okay.
This is Fab related. It's Count Your Blessings. Man, that card sucks.
Yeah.
Like maybe it's like good in Enigma. But man, I was like talking about this card, thinking about this card, and being like listening to other people talking about this card and be like, oh yeah, this card's pretty good. It's basically a 9 card. You play to gain 54 life, which is great. Lem, please shut up. Lem, please shut up. Yeah, so getting 54 life is great, but the problem is against the aggro decks, you're almost never going to be able to play all 9 copies. And you need to somehow stay alive until you play all 9 copies. And even if you do, you're not actually that much ahead. Like it doesn't actually gain you that much more value. You need to like somehow be able to use like your floating resource, which in theory it was pretty good in Dash IE because you can load your weapons and stuff like that. In Enigma, it's pretty good because you get to swing your auras. But just like being able to stay alive long enough to play all your count your blessings is like not it didn't feel like that good. And I guess in the matchups where it was supposed to be theoretically good, which is like the slower matchup, at least in Dash IE, it was just it ended up being better to just load my weapons and attack with them instead of play my count your blessings. So like I ended up playing like 5 count your blessings, and then I would have like a yellow one in my hand, and I'll be like, I'm not playing this card. I'm just gonna pitch it, load my stuff, and attacking you, like ripping your hand apart at this point, instead of like gaining 6. So yeah, I am very unimpressed with that card, is what I have to say. And people who are complaining about it, I don't think you have to worry about it.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think that Count Your Blessings has largely been not as impressive as people think. Maybe the Enigma shell is better. I don't know. We did see one in the calling top 8, so maybe that shell has some legs. But and like maybe Verdance as well, I think is the other spot where it's maybe interesting, mostly because when you combine it with Rampant Growth Life, you get to amp that amount as well, and if you have 2 of them, you get to amp double that amount. So Verdance gets some extra value out of it in a way that other decks don't. But I think in most of your average decks, yeah, it's not great.
Yeah, it's like, you know what this deck feels like? It feels like the Count Your Blessing decks are just like flexing on other people by like they're finding value in not the Count Your Blessing spots, and then they're like flexing on you by like playing their Count the Blessings as like an extra flex and being like, look what I'm doing. I'm playing this cool niche card that people don't want to play. And then it's just like, yeah, you can just play blue 3 blocks and it kind of does the same thing.
Yeah, I think the other thing that strikes me is that often, like, if you're playing a deck like Dash IE and you're like, oh, I have, and you're like full pistol package and you're playing Count Your Blessings, it's a little bit like, it feels like the decks where Count Your Blessings might be good, you're already really good because you just assemble, like, they don't have enough pressure and you assemble all your items and then you just kill them. And it's just like, you don't need all this life gain. You just kind of already crushed those matchups already. And so why don't you just like take your good matchups and then use your slots on your bad matchups?
Yeah, that's how I exactly felt. That's why I'm adding like 5 more cards for the Aurora matchup, and taking out the 9 count your blessings.
No, you should leave them in.
No, not gonna happen. Not gonna happen. It's never again. You know the other bad part about count your blessings? It's
What's that?
easily counterable. Like my Azalea opponent put in poison the well, and I was just like, oh my god, this is like a huge liability that I have this card in my deck. Like if there were just 3 blocks, I would be currently winning. Like it's like holy, I can't play my last Count Your Blessing because they openly had opened the well. Oh, sorry, poisoned the well, and they pitched it. And I know that it's in their pitch deck. And because they play Knock the Dead Whistle, I don't know when they drew it because they shuffled their deck.
Yeah, so when you play, you just have like some percentage chance to just lose.
Yes, but just a note: if you are gonna play Count Your Blessings, Arsenal Oasis Respite in case they have Poison the Well, and then you can pitch a blue, try and gain life. They play poison, you let the poison resolve, and you Oasis gain one, you lose one instead, and then your Count the Blessing will gain you life. So big counterplay there.
Yeah, and the optimal time to do this is on your opponent's turn, so you can get the prevention out of Oasis as well.
That's being too greedy.
Okay, okay. I mean, I think usually you can make that line up, right? Like, because like you have to
Oh,
pass through your opponent's turn before going to your turn.
oh, yeah, sure, yeah. I don't know. It's It's rough. It's rough. I tried. I tried to line that up, and it was scarier than not because typically you're at like single digit life total, and if they just like don't have poison the well, then like you kind of you could die if you don't gain enough life because like if they shoot an arrow for like 12, yeah, I don't know. It's just like all I have to say it was kind of hard to line it up. Like it does not come naturally.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think the fact that you have to line it up to play your card that's already like okay. I don't know. It's a lot
Yeah.
of hoops to jump through. I don't think Count Your Blessings decks are like the worst decks in Flesh and Blood, but I also think they're pretty far from the best. So, which is probably good, honestly. I think they're at like a reasonable spot where you can play them, you can win some games, but it's not destroying the metagame.
Yep, I agree. I completely agree. It just does make for really funny screenshots of when people have over 100 life. Um, but like if they're gonna have over 100 life, that means they didn't need to play Count Your Blessings. Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. It just yeah, that's so true.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think that's everything I don't want to say.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.